But we begin tonight with Make America White Male Dominated Again, starting with the federal government workforce and federal contractors. Now, you may have noticed a theme, a certain buzzword from Donald Trump and many of his cabinet nominees.
We will forge a society that is colorblind and merit-based.
Ensuring readiness and meritocracy is front and center.
Return our country to the merit system, you know?
We must be the ultimate meritocracy.
Yes, 3 white men talking about the importance of merit in roles they're all unqualified for. Donald Trump and his nominee for Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth and nominee for CIA Director John Ratcliffe. It's an especially dubious concept for Trump in particular, since this self-made man, in scare quotes, reaped about $413 million from his father Fred's real estate empire at birth, and then dodged taxes all along the way of his career. That Donald Trump has some, feelings about merit and diversity, which, according to Trump and MAGA World, counts as inherently qualified white men who deserve every job, losing out to people who are not white men and therefore inherently unqualified diversity hires. And with those grievances in mind, Trump repealed Lyndon Johnson's 1965 Executive Order 11246, which forbade federal contractors from discriminating on the basis of race, color, religion, national origin, sex, sexual orientation, or gender identity. It granted the Labor Department the power to enforce its provisions through a contracting standards office and has for decades been used by presidents of both parties to improve workplace standards across the country. The executive order, which Johnson signed a year after the Civil Rights Act of 1964, required that employers who accept federal contract money take affirmative action not to discriminate against job applicants or workers. And as of this week, it is no more. And tonight, as of about 2 hours ago, all federal diversity, equity, and inclusion employees have been placed on paid leave following the replacement executive order Trump signed Tuesday night, claiming to restore merit-based opportunity. Now, again, merit is a curious thing to focus on, since many of Trump's own cabinet picks have been deemed the least meritorious and least qualified individuals to ever be nominated for their posts. There is political Nepo baby Robert F. Kennedy Jr. to run the Department of Health and Human Services, despite having no health care expertise. And South Dakota Governor Kristi Noem for Homeland Security Secretary, who's so qualified, she's banned from tribal lands, making up 12% of her state because of how flagrantly she's offended indigenous tribes. There's Trump's pick for Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard. Where to begin on her merit? The Wall Street Journal reported last week that in Tulsi's meeting with Republican Senator James Lankford, she couldn't clearly articulate what the role of Director of National Intelligence entails. And when she met with Republican Senator Mike Rounds, she seemed confused about a key U.S. national security surveillance power that she would be charged with overseeing. And who could forget Trump's choice for FBI Director Kash Patel? Like Gabbard, he hasn't had a confirmation hearing yet, but he submitted a background questionnaire for senators on the Judiciary Committee. The New York Times notes one of the most intriguing lines in his reference to participating in the American Bar Association's Judicial Intern Opportunity Program, a diversity initiative, while a student at Pace University's law school in 2003. I guess diversity isn't such a dirty word if your sole and total allegiance is to Donald Trump. Meanwhile, perhaps his least qualified cabinet pick could get a vote before the full Senate as soon as tomorrow. Aforementioned Defense Secretary choice and former Fox Weekend host Pete Hegseth, as senators will have to weigh a new allegation involving the content of his character. In a signed affidavit to senators on the Armed Services Committee obtained by NBC News, Hegseth's former sister-in-law, Danielle Hegseth, claims that he engaged in volatile and threatening conduct that caused his second wife, Samantha, to fear for her safety. According to the affidavit, Samantha Hegseth developed and executed plans with members of Hegseth's family and mutual friends to help her escape if she felt she needed to get away from Hegseth, noting that the plans included what Danielle Hegseth refers to as a safe word, code word that Samantha could text to her to let friends and family know, or to text to her friends and family, to let them know that she needed help. Through his lawyer, Hegseth denied that he was abusive to his ex-wife Samantha, and said there was no physical abuse in my marriage. That is what Samantha said during their divorce, and both parties signed a court document saying that neither parent claimed to be a victim of domestic abuse. The affidavit was provided in response to a request by Armed Services Committee ranking member Senator Jack Reed after learning that Danielle Hegseth was interviewed for an FBI background check, but that details of her testimony were not included in the final briefing provided to senators. Joining me now is Senator Chris Murphy of Connecticut. He's a member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, thank you for being here. Let's go through this. The meritocracy that Donald Trump wants to build includes Mr. Hegseth, who, in addition, the Wall Street Journal has reported was repeatedly passed out from alcohol abuse, according to witnesses. Pete Hegseth regularly abused alcohol to the point that he passed out at family gatherings and once needed to be dragged out of a strip club while in uniform, according to an ex-relative's account of his behavior that was given to U.S. lawmakers and reviewed by the Wall Street Journal. He's denied the allegations, calling them part of a smear campaign. Is it a smear campaign by everyone that he used to work with at various places like Fox and these charities and his apparently former relatives? Or is he just not a guy that has, a lot of merit?
Well, I mean, according to Donald Trump, the only merit is that he watched you on TV, right? If you're a TV personality, you are qualified for Donald Trump's cabinet. And I don't know, I mean, maybe in some, lower level departments, that wouldn't be a threat to the country, but it is a threat to the country if the post is the Department of Defense, protecting America, the Director of National Intelligence in charge of hunting down information about terrorists. I mean, listen, this guy is not qualified. I mean, not even remotely qualified. And at his hearing, he tried to pretend not only that this was a witch hunt, but that it was an anonymous witch hunt. Well, increasingly, we have people going on the record, putting their names to very specific stories about gross sexual misconduct, public drunkenness, and financial mismanagement. I had hoped that this last report was the straw that would break the camel's back, that there would be just a handful of Republicans who would press Trump to appoint somebody a little bit more qualified. There is still hope, but the impact of Hegseth taking the reins of a department that oversees the moral development of teenagers and men and women in their early 20s, just incredibly, incredibly disastrous for the morale and development of our armed forces, young men and women who are looking for not just strategic leadership at the top of the Department of Defense, but moral leadership as well.
But what does it say about, the Republican Party and your colleagues on the other side of the aisle who are going to confirm him? Let's just be clear that, Joni Ernst would actually be well qualified to be Secretary of Defense, but she's a woman. The current Secretary of Defense is a 4-star general, but MAGA people regularly refer to him as a quote-unquote DEI hire. He's a literal combat veteran 4-star general, but he's black. So therefore he can't. I mean, the way that they're determining merit does appear to have something to do with the color of one's skin, one's gender, and whether or not they're on television. So what is meritocracy? What does it even mean in the Trump era?
Well, I think all it means to Donald Trump is, first and foremost, that you will be blindly loyal to him, right? That's his assessment of merit. Will you be loyal to me? Will you violate the law and the Constitution if that is what is necessary to help me politically or keep me in power? B, did I see you on TV? And do I think that you look like somebody who, in my mind, should occupy that post? But, we saw this on display over the last 4 years. I watched my Republican Senate colleagues target women nominees, especially for the judiciary, and nominees of color. They were subject routinely to a totally different set of scrutiny than white nominees or white male nominees were. So this isn't new to Donald Trump's nomination process. When Joe Biden was putting up nominees, his women nominees and his black and Hispanic nominees would always get a different level of attention, a higher bar that magically had to be crossed by many Senate Republicans.
Let's talk about some of the pragmatic impacts of this. There's a federal hiring freeze that there's a concern among military veterans that the VA could be understaffed as a result of it. They've frozen hiring. There were nurses who were preparing to accept jobs as early as February who will now not be there. And there's already a shortage of care in the military. Are you concerned that the hiring freeze there will harm veterans?
Well, it absolutely will harm veterans. What we already know is that we have unjustifiably long waiting times for care throughout the VA, especially in the mental health system. So you have to constantly be filling vacancies just to make sure that veterans who are at risk of suicide don't go into an interminable waiting period. But remember what their agenda is. Their agenda is to destroy people's faith in government so that they can sell government off to the billionaire class. And so that's partially their agenda in the VA. It's to underfund the VA, the core VA, where you have government doctors and therapists doing work so that some private equity firm can come in and buy up the veterans clinic and make profit off of it. So their agenda here is not to save you money, is not to run a better system. It's to make government look bad so that they can hand it off to their billionaire friends.